and welcome. Oh, I'll start over. Sorry. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this conversation on the topic of men of faith for gender equality. My name is Emily Nielsen Jones, and I am one of the authors and the co-conveners of The Girl Child and Her Long Walk to Freedom, which is the project that is convening this dialogue. And really our hope for the project and this conversation is to create safe and brave spaces like this, where we can really deepen into the issues that have been plaguing our society related to gender inequality. And we're really encouraging curiosity, empathy, dialogue, and really digging a little deeper. So that's what our aim is for today. And really to get us started in the why of the project, we have a short little video to watch. And what I'd like you to do before this is to recall to your mind a girl child you know and love. Just for a moment. Hold that girl in your heart and look at the world through her eyes.
Girl child, can you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be?
Deep down, I've always believed in myself and known I'm just as good as anyone else. But lately, I notice that the world treats me differently because I'm a girl. From sunrise to sunset, my sisters and I do chores at home, while my brothers get to do whatever they want. And I see my mother carry the full burden of tending to our family. In church, they don't like when I ask questions, so I've learned to sit quietly. In the street, I see girls who walk in fear, as mothers warn their daughters not to give men the wrong idea. Everywhere I look, the world tells me I'm inferior, but this does not feel true. What's going on here?
Girl child, you are right to question.
Who? Do I know you?
I am your mother's mother and her mother's mother. I am the mother of all.
Then you must know why the world treats us this way. Please tell me, how did this come to be?
Well, it is complicated, and there are many overlapping theories, but we do know that these traditions were man-made long, long ago. It was not always like this. In the beginning, men and women walked side by side together, valued equally as hunters and gatherers. Eventually, we began to settle down. And around this time, we elevated the idea of property and the need to own land and control a workforce. Men became protective of what was theirs, which led to fighting. Sexual violence against women became a weapon of war. Conquerors enslaved women as concubines. Men felt entitled to own and take on many wives, even in times of peace. As their wealth grew, so did the desire to give males an inheritance. Girls came to be seen as property, valued primarily for their sexual purity and ability to have children. They were exchanged between families for a price. Many girls were subjected to traditions aimed at preserving their purity and family honor. Many are still practiced today. It is this domination that gave birth to all forms of slavery and how women became the world's first slaves. It is how patriarchy and the ethic of male honor became the norm. Patriarchy was woven into our civilizations, our laws, economies, philosophies, sciences, and especially our religions. It is everywhere, and it is invisible. It's no accident that we replaced ancient images of God as both male and female with images of God as a man.
But haven't we made progress since those times?
In some ways, yes. But in many ways, we're still moving in the wrong direction.
But what can I do when patriarchy is everywhere? I can't turn my back on my family or on my faith.
There is a spiritual path to liberation in the Bible and other religious traditions, but we must be brave and question what isn't working. Women and men, girls and boys, even the earth itself are suffering under the domination of patriarchy. To heal our land, we must bravely untangle our traditions from this oldest oppression. What was made by our hand can also be unmade. We must keep walking the Exodus path from slavery to the freedom of the promised land. Imagine if we could re-know the beautiful world that was meant for all God's children.
A world where girls can grow up feeling safe and equally valued?
A world where both boys and girls grow up to be all they were meant to be. Girl child, your curiosity has set you on a path many others have walked before you. Because of their work, we know the way forward, but there's a lot more to do and more truths to discover. Are you ready to take this journey with me?
First, thank you for joining us for this important conversation, because patriarchy is a problem for men and women. And it's going to be, I can't wait to hear our panelists' conversation. Before I introduce them, I would like to just to go over a few housekeeping rules. Just if you have comments and questions, please use the chat. We will have time for question and conversation at the end. And then please keep yourself muted in the meantime. And that's about it. But let me now just go and introduce our panelists. Thank you so much, Dominique, Jeff, and Patrick, for taking the time to do that and for being involved and for the work that you do. So Reverend Dominique Misolo is the co-author of Girl Child Long Walk Reading Journal and is the director of the Institute for Faith and Gender Empowerment. He usually joins us from Kisumu, Kenya, but I understand that today is in Nairobi. Reverend Jeff Bass is the executive director of Emmanuel Gospel Center in Boston. He joins us from Boston in Massachusetts, the United States. Reverend Patrick Musembi is the dean of the School of Arts and Humanities at Daystar University. He's also a Girl Child Long Walk Fellow, or first cohort of Girl Child Long Walk Fellows. We're very proud of saying that. And he joins us for Nairobi, Kenya. And at this stage, the question to the panelists and what they would like to talk about, they say that they want to talk about is their stories, what they do, how they do it. And it's about gender equality. It's about social change and why it matters to have men of faith for gender equality. Thank you so much. So please, at this point, Dominique.
Thank you so much, Maria Rose, for this opportunity. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I am Reverend Dominique Misolo, and I'm a priest in the Anglican Church of Kenya. I am a husband and a father. I'm married to Christine, and we are blessed with 2 girls and 2 boys, Mimi, Emily, Samuel, and Bill, respectively. I'm also with Emily Nielsen-Jones, the co-author of the Girl Child Long Walk to Freedom. I'm also the founder of Institute for Faith and Gender Empowerment, a faith-based non-governmental organization that promotes equality and justice for women and men by working with the community and faith groups in Kenya and across sub-Saharan Africa through advocacy, capacity building, and mentorship. Since 2013, IFAGE, Institute for Faith and Gender Empowerment, has been at the forefront advocating for equality and justice for women and girls in Kenya and across Africa by addressing gender gaps, and challenging structures and systems of patriarchy, power imbalance, and attitude in the church and society that fuel violence against women and girls based on gender. Before I talk about what we do and how we do it, kindly allow me to tell my story, the story of self, the story that actually propelled me to think about faith organization advocating for gender justice. I was born in a male-dominated polygamous family that depicts men as superior to women. As a young boy growing up, I witnessed abuse against my mother and against other women in my community. In our family as a young boy, I used to see my father beating and fighting my mother almost every evening. I could not tell why. Going to church as a young boy too, I could not see women leaders leading church services and preaching. Again, one day, I attended Chief's Barasa, which is a community meeting concerned with local administrative and security issues at the village level. Getting into the meeting, I was offered a chair to sit, and together with my mother was not given a chair, but actually she shut down. From there, I started picking that I was privileged over my mom because I was a man, I was male, and my mom was female. And I used to ask myself from time to time, what is going on here? Because I could not understand as a young boy growing up. Later in 2009, as an adult, during my theological studies at St. Paul's University in Kenya, I came across an academic journal from Christians for Biblical Equality, which critically challenged my traditional views and religious beliefs with facts about faith, women, and gender justice ideas. And from these journals, I was convinced that Christian faith and the Bible demands equality and justice for men and women. Based on this discovery, friends, I came up with the idea that faith community stands a better position to challenge patriarchy and gender stereotypes, social norms against women and girls based on gender. That's how I came up with the organization called Institute for Faith and Gender Empowerment, abbreviated as IFAGE. So after that story, allow me also to tell you what we are doing through IFAGE, actually through which we partner with Emily and Imago Dei Fund and other organizations. Number one, we have 3 main programs that we are doing at IFAGE, which number one is leadership training on biblical gender equality. Here, we train and equip pastors and faith leaders with biblical knowledge, which engage pastors and church leaders on biblical gender theology, including correct interpretation and application of sacred text. Through this program, we do local training with pastors and also host annual Pan-African Faith Leaders Conferences, which promote biblical gender knowledge and at the same time deconstruct and demystify religious norms and attitudes that breeds violence against women and girls. Since 2013, IFAGE have successfully planned and hosted 5 international conferences dubbed as Pan-African Faith Leaders Conference on Faith and Gender, twice in Kenya, once in Uganda, once in Tanzania, and once in Rwanda. Through this training and conferences, IFAGE has provided spaces to about 1,050 key faith leaders from 11 different countries across Africa and beyond on biblical gender equality. The second program that we are doing currently in Kenya and also across the region is male engagement and training on positive masculinity. Through our contextualized faith-inspired curriculum, we train men to understand, identify, and challenge those toxic masculinities that fuel violence against women and girls in our society. Positive masculinity training promotes a transformative approach in which women and men have equal voice in decision-making and on development and on issues affecting them in their society. So far, we have trained about 1,200 men and traditional leaders on positive masculinity in order to end gender-based violence. Thirdly, we also train and advocate for sexual and reproductive health education among youths and adolescents. I want to talk about why we're doing this and why it's not a really shift from our biblical gender training. In Kenya and in my community, about 10,000 girls between the age of 13 and 19 drop out of school every year due to teenage pregnancy and early marriage. And again, studies reveal that young women between the age 15 and 24 account for almost a half of new HIV infections, and many other reports indicate how young girls are vulnerable. IFED has developed faith-inspired sexual and reproductive curriculum that provide young people with accurate sexual and reproductive health information. And by doing this, we anticipate outcomes that promote sexual health and well-being of young people to live a dignified life. This includes supporting healthy and responsible and positive life experiences, as well as preventing unintended pregnancy. As I talk now, I'm calling from Nairobi, and I'm working with the civil societies around Nairobi and youth leaders and also faith leaders, including Muslims, that have been invited to come and talk about inclusivity, the inclusivity, the social inclusion, and Jesus model way of talking about inclusivity. We are engaging community to understand that instead of being a resistance to the progress of gender equality, faith leaders and faith community can be a force, a positive force that actually can advance biblical gender equality, can advance empowerment of women and girls. Many times when non-faith organizations talk about churches and religious organizations, many times they have been the negative side. I thank God because IFED, we are opening spaces and also empowering community leaders, church leaders, to understand the position that the church is actually to advance equality and justice for women and girls. And therefore, friends, as we talk about men of faith for gender justice, I stand to say that it is a privilege to be a male champion for gender justice, especially as a priest, because it gives me a platform through which actually we engage men and we engage society on how we can end gender-based violence. And with those few remarks, kindly friends, allow me to end my story and also end my speaking to allow other people to ask me questions, which actually we respond to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dominique. Thank you. I'm always touched by your story and I love your commitment. Patrick, you're next.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You want me to go next? Asante. Let me share my screen. And start with a greeting for each one of us. Good morning to those that are out of this continent, and good afternoon for those who are joining from Nairobi. And I want just to give you a breakdown of the things that I will share within the limited time that I have. I will talk about my story briefly to help us understand how I got this inspiration into gender matters. And then I'll talk about my vision, what I envision and what I am doing. And specifically, we'll talk about 3 pillars that underpin my passion and the work that I do. And then I will look at particular programs that are running currently that I want just to give an insight to see how we can use our engagement and our normal day-to-day work in our places of work to be an influence for positive change in regard to gender justice. I want to give you a breakdown about my family. And that photo with my own mom is very important to me. This photo was taken in 2018. In 2018, after 6 years of struggling to complete my doctoral program, my doctoral studies, and I dedicated it to my mother. As a second born in a family of 10, life was very difficult for us because we were born at intervals of 2 years between one to the next sibling. And my father, being a primary school teacher, basic teacher, his earnings weren't a lot to support us in school. So I remember in high school, which took about 6 years from 1 to Form 6, if I can condense it, I roughly spent about 4.5 years in high school. Reason, because most of the times I was home because of balances, for tuition balances that I hadn't completed. So I spent months sometimes at home because my father couldn't keep all of us in school. But I remember just before I took the national exam, my mother decided to venture into grocery selling. In here, we call them mama mboga. So she decided to become a mama mboga. And I remember her story very well. She would wake up in the morning as early as 4 a.m. and trek long distances looking for green groceries from farmers across the region, sometimes crossing flooded rivers, sometimes hills in the dark of the mornings, and a journey that started at 4 a.m. in the morning, she would be back into the local market about 3 p.m. to spread our wares to sell. Now, if you look at my mom keenly, you may not see it. But if somebody was keen physically and you got to see her, she's slightly bent over from her shoulders. And the reason for that is because of the heavy luggage that she carried on her back, stripped on her head and carrying that load for the longest distance and the longest period from about 6 a.m. to about 2 or 3 p.m. in the night, in the evening, to come and sell to supplement my father's income to put us into school. That's actually what enabled each one of us with my siblings, and 10 of us, 8 are living, and all of us have either a college diploma or a university degree at the minimum. And all this courtesy of our mother. Never mind, my mother is not schooled. She only speaks our local language, the vernacular language, and she will not hear when you talk any other language because she did not manage to get an education for herself. But she was so determined to ensure that none of us did not get a good education. And so she sacrificed herself, she sacrificed her health, and she sacrificed everything for us to enjoy the kind of life that we enjoy today together with my siblings. This story of my mother gives me the inspiration to realize that women have a potential, and a potential that needs to be helped to come out. In my home, I can say, although we were poor, we enjoyed a lot of peace in our family. My parents never quarreled. My mother never went to her parents. We never saw that at all, although we were very poor. But there is something that I found out from my mother, and which I saw clearly demonstrated. In spite of our industriousness, in spite of our contribution to our education, my father never gave her an opportunity to speak during family gatherings. She never made a decision for the family. In fact, he would actively tell her to keep quiet, even in our midst, because he didn't want her to talk at all and to make any contribution. And so I grew with that kind of dichotomy here is a very industrious mother, but a mother who is not given an opportunity to speak and to make a contribution to enhance the welfare of the family, though she wanted the good out of us. And that made me to realize that lack of creating that environment for the girl child is a curse for the human race. That if men do not actively create that environment for our girls to thrive and to become what God intended of them, then we are doing a disservice to mankind. Because I can tell that right from my own mother, and now she has grown and helped us. I want to share a bit about my vision, and my vision is to see a society where we end sexual and gender-based violence by influencing men, and particularly clergy, to become active drivers of the gender equality agenda and to empower victims of sexual and gender-based violence, and in this matter, teenage mothers, to become self-reliant and to be responsible in educating their children through alternative means of livelihoods, as opposed to selling their bodies, quote unquote, in terms of prostitution, as I have encountered in one of the locations where one of our churches is based. And so these three that you see here are critical pillars that underpin the ministry and the work that I am involved in. And one of it is on women empowerment. And we have come up with a program we call Omoka Mama Network. I'll talk about it in a minute. And then the other is empowering men and particularly adolescent boys to become key drivers of the agenda of gender justice. And the third one is to empower clergy to become catalysts of gender justice. The reason for this is we have a lot of advocacy that has been done on women empowerment at the level of advocacy. And in my opinion, this seems to be addressing the symptoms of the problem. But if we are to address as clergy and as people of faith, to address the root causes, then it is important for us to look at the contribution done by the men, and programs that are then targeting men and boys for that matter become important, as well as the role played by the clergy in our context here. And if I use my own example of a country, we are 80% Christian for that matter, and the clergy is important in driving the attitudes, the behavior of people in changing. And so influencing the clergy will be an important aspect of my vision, as I say. Now, one of the pillars that I mentioned earlier, the Omoka Mama Network. The Omoka Mama Network, this word Omoka is a Sheng word used in our country here, and it means to make a sudden progress in life and abandon the old life and pick on a new life. Now, a number of these teenage girls have been involved in prostitution. This is in conjunction with one of our churches where I act as a leader of these churches. And this church is located in the busy highway of the city of Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, and the port of Mombasa. And in between that busy road, we have long distance trucks plying that route all the way to Democratic Republic of Congo, to Kigali in Rwanda, to Kampala in Uganda, to Bujumbura in Burundi. All these drivers stationed in this simple town, and they spend a night there. And girls who have been rejected by their families because they became pregnant as teenagers without any social network, they all come down to this town and practice prostitution. A number of them come with one child and they end up getting many children and unable to support them, to feed them, and to keep them at these kinds of children. So this Omoka Mama Network, it's an initiative to recruit, rehabilitate, and empower these teenage mothers to become self-reliant and to move away from prostitution to gainful employment, working with their own hands to support their own families and to educate specifically to educate their children in the manner in which I saw my own mother do, educating the 10 of us using the kind of work that she did. So it is possible and it can be done. And this is part of what we are doing in Omoka Mama Network. During the pandemic specifically, we found a number of these women or female-headed families quite exposed because there were curfews, there were lockdowns, business went down, the trucks even themselves were not plying that route. And as a result of that, we realized a number of these children coming to our Sunday school and they had not taken breakfast. So an encounter with a few of them, the pastor talking to them, he established that some of them trekking for a distance of like 1 mile and asking them, they have had no breakfast. So with the church, we decided to be serving them hot porridge every Sunday to keep them coming to Sunday school and to enable them to remain in school, as it were. This is something we want to expand so that it's not just on Sunday, but that during school holidays, we can be able to draw them into the church facility and present them with an opportunity where they can do their schoolwork or homework, because majority of them stay in homes that are single rooms, and so they do not have enough space to do their homework. And so the church will present a great opportunity for these kind of children to do their homework. Let me talk about the second pillar, about the young men's breakfast. This is an initiative that was thrown my way by my own vice chancellor at the university. And he said he has a heart for the young people and he has a personal experience in his own home. And so we put together the first breakfast last year, and the second breakfast was put in this month, actually on 12th of March. And we brought together about 300 young men. And just looking through who attended, we established that we even had young men from other universities and not just my university that had asked for the young men to come. So as they registered, we established there were other young men from other universities. What are we doing with this? What are we talking to the young people here? In this specific one, we were talking about responsible masculinity. The idea was to help the young people understand the privileges that they have as men and not to take them for granted, and realize how they can use the same responsibly to create that environment that is inclusive and giving a chance to the next girl in front of them. It was interesting talking to the young men, and I recall one young man who stood in the podium when we had a plenary. We broke them into groups and had mentors sitting in each of those groups and talking to them, helping the young men to talk about their background. But when we came together for the plenary, young man said this, and I found this very interesting. He said, what will you help us? Or how can you help us? Because we realize that young girls of today prefer bad boys. They prefer those boys who drink. They prefer those boys who throw parties after party. They prefer those boys who are naughty. What happens to the good boys? Where shall we go? We found that very interesting. It sent us to thinking, and we are still scratching our heads to see what can we do about that kind of a situation that was posed by one of our young men. One of the ways in which we are working in this, in addition to influencing them to become active drivers of gender equality and reconciliation in their communities, as in campuses where they come from, we are thinking of commissioning a team of experts to prepare a manual to guide mentorship of university students across the country, so that we have a curriculum of a sense that speaks to the issues of gender justice and reconciliation to mentor young men, not just in my own university, but also across the universities within our region, and looking to how we can train trainers or peer mentors to mentor groups of students in the various universities across our country. It's exciting. Just yesterday, I passed by the office of our president, university president, vice chancellor, and I saw a letter coming from the National Police Service, and they were making reference to this event that was held at the university and how they saw it splashed in the media and social media in the country. And they were writing to collaborate with my university to train new recruits at the National Police Training College in our country on gender reconciliation and justice. A great opportunity for the university that seems to be opening. And as we talk right now, the university is writing to respond to that letter, which came from the National Police Service of our country, and seeing how we can train recruits from the Kenya National Police Service. Allow me to finish with this third pillar on the Pastors Dialogue Forum that seeks to bring together pastors as key community leaders to address questions of gender violence and patriarchy, because it is important, as was said earlier, to engage the men. When the men are not on the table in this agenda, we will lose it. But the more we bring the men into the table, not to say that pastors are all men or male, but when we bring them together, the clergy for that matter, then we will be able to spread the gospel a little further. And so I feel as a clergy and as a leader in the Christian community, I have a role, have a responsibility right from my own setting in the family and what I saw, and my passion to drive this agenda through university students and through the church, and the opportunities that God gives me just around the places where I am to do the kind of things that I do. So thank you, and God bless you. Back to you, Mary Ross.
Okay, wonderful. Can you stop sharing, Patrick? Okay,
There you go. Yeah.
there we go. Patrick, anyway, Dominic, Patrick, it is so inspiring. I mean, I'm starting my day, we're starting our day where we are, and it's such a wonderful way of doing it. It's so exciting. At any rate, you know, at this point, Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here today for this important conversation. And thank you, Reverend Dominic and Reverend Patrick, for sharing about your amazing work. It's been a pleasure getting to know you through the girl child and through these conversations. This is the girl child I think about. This is my granddaughter, Lila. And so when Emily asks us to think about a young girl, I think about Lila, who's 6 years old and lives in England. And I have a lot of boys in my life, and she's the girl that inspires me and to think about this. I also want to say, Marie Rose, that I'm not a reverend. I'm a civil engineer by training. And so I respect the reverends in the group, but I'm not a reverend. I am the executive director of the Emmanuel Gospel Center in Boston. We're a faith-based Christian nonprofit that works to support Christian leaders in urban Boston. We work to understand how the city and the church are changing. We get behind leaders that are doing important work. And so we support about 50 church school partnerships. We support refugee work, and we work with immigrant leaders. We have a program that strengthens Black churches. We engage leaders in challenging conversations about race and much more. We serve a diverse city that is majority people of color, and we serve a diverse church that's majority women. We've always thought it's important for EGC to reflect who we serve, and we have a diverse staff and board team that has strong leadership from both women and from people of color. And for me, having a diverse team was very important because I'm a white male executive director, and I need differing perspectives that women and people of color bring, and I've always valued and prioritized having a high functioning, diverse team in our organization. And I've grown up around strong women. So both Dominic and Patrick honor their moms. And my mom, I learned competition from my mom. She was a fierce competitor in sports, never let me win anything. I learned how to shop from my dad, but I've learned a ton from my mom and respect her greatly. My first boss out of college at Arthur D. Little was a woman who was brilliant and tough and taught me so much about how to be an effective consultant, an effective writer, and a strong leader. I've reported to, we've had female board chairs at EGC that have been amazing, that have really helped the center grow. And EGC has always had female leaders in key positions in both the board and the staff. And I'm married to an amazing woman. So some people might know Ellen, she's wonderful. And even though our marriage vows included the word submit for me or submit for her, but not for me, we were young, we were trying to be biblical. We've always been equal partners, and I found that a co-equal interdependence is a wonderful way to go through life. When I became a Christian in high school, I was taught a complementarian worldview, but my theology that I was taught did not square well with my experience at work or at home. And it took me a while to work through with my church community, the theology part, but I've landed very solidly on the egalitarian side at this point. And I took the Girl Child Reading Journey because I was invited by our friends at the Imago Dei Fund who support Emmanuel Gospel Center financially. And because I was making it a priority to understand race issues more deeply, it also made sense to me to try to understand gender issues and the experiences of women in the world. I'd just like to share 3 takeaways from the reading journey. First, I was appalled to learn how much women are mistreated in so much of the world. I did not know these things. So the Girl Child reading covers a range of topics, including gendercide, female slavery, coverture, wife chastisement, son preference and unwanted baby girls, rape and sexual torture as a sport of war, enslaving marriages, female rites of passage, including genital cutting, and more. And frankly, it's a hard read. It's hard to read about these things. It's emotional, it's challenging to read. And it seems like in many places in the world, mistreating women is almost seen as like a necessary part of being a man. In the US, we certainly have our problems too, but I think in our culture, women are mistreated in more subtle ways, perhaps, or at least to me, it seems more subtle. But the mistreatment needs to change everywhere, in the US and in other places. The underlying power dynamics and bias are similar, whether the expression is overtly explicit or hard to see. So my second takeaway, it was eye-opening to learn how ancient and foundational patriarchy is and how it predates just about everything. Sorting out culture from faith has always been tricky, and learning about patriarchy helped me to see how Judaism and Christianity developed on a cultural foundation of male power dynamics. And once you see that, it becomes a bit easier to differentiate cultural patriarchy from enduring biblical truth. Patriarchy is not ordained by God, but the Imago Dei is, and men and women were created together in the image of God, and we have a ton of work to do to sort this out everywhere. And I often tease Marie Rose. She was in my small group in the reading journey, that she's radicalized me about patriarchy. So it's really changed my view and made it much more important in the scale of things that I care about. And the third thing, my third takeaway from the journey is that I've become convinced that men need to speak up against patriarchal assumptions and practices and support women and work for culture change whenever and wherever we can. Men have an important and I think necessary role to play if things are to change. This is not a women's issue, this is a human issue, and men just need to step up for change. I'm grateful through the journey to meet men who are in the thick of working on this change, and I've become more committed to use whatever power influence I have to work for change in my spheres too. So for example, one practical result of the Girl Child journey is I sat down with a spreadsheet a year ago and rebuilt EGC's pay structure with both a race lens and with the gender equity lens. We weren't terribly out of whack, but we were out of whack, and we weren't as balanced as we could be. And I advocated for some significant pay adjustments and worked with the board to build them into our budget this year. Pay inequality in our organization was something I had the power to do something about, and I made it a priority to add, even though it added some additional challenge to our budget, and we did that work. As I learn about the challenges women face in the world and the power dynamics of patriarchy in our culture, I see a lot of parallels with what I'm learning about racism. As a white leader and a white person, I don't experience what people of color experience, but I have an important role to play in understanding and learning from the experiences and perspectives of people of color that I know, and a responsibility to use my influence to bring about change wherever I can. In the same way, and similar as a man, I don't experience what women experience, but I have an important role to play in understanding and learning from the experiences and perspectives of women in my life, and a responsibility to use my influence to bring about change wherever I can. I teach a course, so I'm not a reverend, but I do teach a course at Gordon Conwell Seminary on systems thinking. So I use my engineering skills to teach seminarians about systems thinking. And one of the main things I try to get across is how truly hard it is to see reality because of our inherent biases. There's a ton of good books on this, like Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, The Invisible Gorilla, Sway. And I have lots of parlor tricks to demonstrate to students what it feels like to not see clearly. But a big part of the lesson is that we need to do what it takes to open our eyes and learn. We can overcome some of our biases if we think it's important and we're willing to do the work. So the Girl Child was an eye-opener for me. And I hope that more men will take the time to read and to learn and to listen to women. And I hope that more men will work to open their eyes and do the work it takes to overcome their gender biases. And I hope that more men will do what they can to be agents of change in their own spheres of influence. So thank you for giving me a little bit of time to share my journey.
Oh, all of you are just, thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Dominique. It's wonderful, and you're also right. I mean, so many issues are seen as women's issues, but this is not about just women. It's about a better world. It's a human issue. It's a human rights issue. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for making this conversation and this morning just so special, or this morning, afternoon, evening, whatever, wherever you are. And at this stage, what I'd love to do, we have a few minutes left for questions. Anybody would like to comment or have a question, please, let us know. I don't know, but I mean, Patrick, I see your comment, feel free to speak up. Dominique, did you have something to say? I see that you unmuted yourself.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Marie-Rose. I'm so grateful for the opportunity once again to share our story and how our story linked to what we are doing in the community to bring transformation and also bring freedom to the girl child. I'm so happy with the presentation of Jeff and also Patrick, and knowing that when men come out to speak about injustices against women and men, actually it has power. And therefore, I want to congratulate my brother Patrick and also my brother Jeff for amazing work that we are all doing. Like when I've been working on positive masculinity, engaging men on positive masculinity, many times men get challenged, and many times actually I feel in my heart that it sinks down and they see for themselves what actually the effect of patriarchy. I was talking to the group that I'm training here in Nairobi, that it is about the ideology that actually breeds those attitudes. The moment we dismantle, we deconstruct the ideology underlying that actually is manifesting through attitude, we are not going to defeat inequalities and injustices against women and girls. And therefore, it is my joy to do what I'm doing, because I'm doing it from my heart. When I talk about reproductive health for young girls and boys, I think that my mother was married at the age of 15, and actually he had 12 children. Not against her will, because she had no knowledge about reproductive health, and she was not empowered in any way. Actually, my father was so harsh and so beaten. So when I was talking to young boys, young girls between the age of 13 to 20, it reflects on my own mother and how we suffered, the poverty that we give up. Also, when I talk about positive masculinity, I think about my dad, because he was living to fulfill the dictates of patriarchy. He was brought up in that culture. in that dictate, and therefore he was fulfilling what he never understood, because I don't think that he proposes to marry 3 wives with many children like that, and actually beating them like children. So we must work out to dismantle, to disconstruct these ideologies that breed violence against women and girls, and that's patriarchy, and it's all what the Girl Child Long Walk to Freedom talks about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. I see a question, and it's about, in your experience, from Susan, how open are clergy to engaging in this work? Is pushback prevalent? And I just want to say, I've talked to all of you, and I know that obviously gender equality work is not necessarily welcome. So this is a fight. We have a few minutes for comments. Who would like to comment before we close the session?
Okay, I can come in at first, and maybe Reverend Dominique may add his voice into this. But one of the things that I have found out is that this debate seems to be restricted in the academy. It seems to be an academic discourse up there, but it's not down in the practice, where the common pastor who meets with the local grassroots communities is. That debate is not there. It's still up here. So I think there is need to see how to translate that into practice and down into the grassroots. There is some sense of resistance, and I see that resistance more in what we would qualify in our context here as mainline churches, the missionary churches, the old churches, so to say. It's not quite an open debate for them. But in the smaller churches that are springing out, indigenous churches, this debate is welcome. And there is some receptivity in that regard. That's, of course, my experience, but I would be keen to hear how Dominique says about it.
Thank you, Patrick. Actually, what I do most of the time actually is doing training with clergy and the priest on biblical gender equality. That is our #1 program. That actually is where I started. This male engagement and sexual and reproductive health are coming actually as the second thought. My initial idea was actually to reach out to my fellow priests and also to train them on biblical. Actually, I think was revealed to me when I was in my theological seminary. So #1, we have been using the Bible as a tool of transformation. So many times, because a clergy that I meet from Anglican Church, from Catholic Church in our local communities, and from Presbyterian and local churches, most of them are theologians. So we start from the known. And therefore, when we open the Bible, we reason, we have dialogue, and we reason together. And first of all, we break the Bible in 3 categories. #1, the ideal creation of God. What was the purpose and the ideal of God? Then we come about the fall, where actually is Genesis up to the end of the Old Testament. Then finally, we talk about redemption. And therefore, we talk about Jesus' leadership and the New Testament about equality and justice for men and women. And also, we talk about the Pauline letters. Many times we have argument because people come from a different school of thoughts. Like I'm coming from an egalitarian perspective. Other people are coming from complementarian perspective. Others are traditional perspective. But the moment that we come together and reason, and also with available statistics, the manifestations in the community, what is happening, many times it is easy for us to agree. We agree most of the time than we disagree. It is not 100% that we agree with everyone, but many times, patriarchy benefits men. So when somebody refuses to listen, and the Bible also talks about that, that we have our selfishness, that we don't want to open about this thing and talk about it. Like in my diocese, where I started when actually from my seminary, and I went back to my bishop and I wanted to resign because I thought that I was not going to be accommodated in my church. The bishop gave me opportunity, and I started from teaching with my fellow clergy. Now, In Kenya and across sub-Saharan, across East Africa, we are having the first woman bishop, actually from the Anglican Diocese of London. Currently, we have another one, but not in the south. If you come in our clergy chapter, which we have almost 50 priests, almost half are with female clergy and a half are male clergy. It tells me that in my church and wherever we are moving, people are getting the truth of biblical gender equality, and the church actually is talking about biblical gender equality wherever they are. We have changing the sermons that they are giving when actually preaching during a wedding. Initially, we were talking about Pauline, how Pauline letters and Pauline texts talk about submissive of women. Now, the context of submissive, when talk about the women submit, what context was Paul talking? We are talking about leadership roles and leadership hierarchy. Now, our clergy knows how to do biblical studies in their own churches and also to talk about biblical gender equality, which is actually a great progress for us. And we thank God for that.
This is such a wonderful conversation, view, and really gives us hope in terms of the progress that can be done when people take a stand and when men work together with women to make a difference. So at this stage, I'm trying to make sure that we are on track. It's 10 a.m. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I really want to thank again all of the different panelists for taking the time to have this conversation. And we hope to send it, as you know, it was recorded, and to share it. This is really worth sharing. And to thank everyone, each and every one of the panelists for joining our conversation. Thank you so much. And we hope that you'll join us for future conversations of this kind. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.